In this video, I'm going to talk about lesson 2.3, which is all about polynomial nomenclature or naming, vocabulary, just different types of words that have to do with polynomials. So what is a polynomial? Well, here's an example, and here are some words that describe the components that make up a polynomial. So let's go through each of the words. Notice that a polynomial is broken up, or in this case, broken up into three parts. They're broken up with these pluses. Now they could be minuses, but in this case they're pluses. So there's three things. Each of those things are called terms. Okay, so in this case we have one term. That's where our first box was, our second term, and our third term. So again, terms are usually separated by pluses or minuses. Okay? Now, I'm going to skip the green word for a second. I'm going to go into the red word, which is a variable. That one's a little bit easier to describe. Inside the polynomial, any letters you see are called variables. And so this has an A, a B, and an X. All of those are called variables. And I'm going to write that word right over here by this arrow because I think it's pointing at the X. Going back to the green word now, a coefficient. A coefficient is a number in front of a variable. So notice that the 7 is in front of the X, and that would make it a coefficient. If you look really carefully at the whole polynomial, you should be able to find another one. So that is going to be this 2. It's right in front of the variables a and b. Coefficients are commonly mistaken for constants and vice versa. A constant is a number that has no variable behind it. So that's the 16 right here, constant. Again, the green and the blue, coefficient and constant, can be differentiated when you consider that a coefficient has to have a letter behind it. So it's a number with a letter behind it, whereas a constant is just the number, no letter behind it. Okay, so those are all the components of an entire polynomial. What I'm going to get into now are what are the different types of polynomials. So not the components within a polynomial, what are the different types of polynomials? So under the umbrella word polynomial, there are several different types. And so one is called a monomial, one is called a binomial, we got a trinomial, and then we also still have just the polynomial. Okay, mono means one. So if you have a polynomial but it only has one term, it's called a monomial. Bi, like in bicycle, two wheels, right? It means two. So if you have a polynomial that has two terms, it's going to be called a binomial. Like a triangle has three sides, so tri means three, and if you have three terms in your polynomial, it's going to be called specifically a trinomial. Now anything bigger than 3, like 4, 5, 6, and so on, those we're just going to call poly. Poly means many, so many terms. Okay, so anything above 3, we're just going to label it polynomial. Let me give you an example of one. So let's say something like 2x squared y cubed plus 8x y 4 minus 11. Okay, so this polynomial has three parts or three terms. Therefore, it's a trinomial. But I did this example just to give you something to look at in order to consider these two words or phrases. The degree of the term and the degree of the polynomial. So let's just talk about the degree of the term first. Each of these terms are able to have the degree calculated. And so for instance, the first one, in order to calculate the degree of just this one term, what you're going to do is you're going to add the exponents on top of the variables. So 2 plus 3 is going to give you a degree of 5. The next one, remember that this x has a degree of 1, even though it's invisible. If you wanted to find the degree of this entire box, you take the exponents 1 and 4 and you add them together and you also get 5. This one, because it doesn't have any variables behind it, this has a degree of 0. So you can find the degree of each of the terms inside a polynomial. Let me just get rid of all my scratch work. Okay, and then we'll talk about the next one. The degree of the entire polynomial. So instead of finding the degree of each of the components, what I'm going to do is find the degree of the entire thing. And so what you want to do is you want to find, first of all, the degree of each, which we had before. This was 5. The degree of this one, which is 5, and the degree of this one, which is 0. Whichever one has the highest degree is going to describe the degree of the entire polynomial. So in this case, the degree of the polynomial is, degree would be 5. All right, now let's just make a change really quick so that I can make my point. Let's change this to, I don't know, a 7. So if that changes to a 7, the degree of just this term would be 7 plus 4, which is 11. In that case, the degree of not the term, but the entire polynomial is going to be the biggest degree. So the degree of this polynomial is 11. Okay, moving on to the last part. Let's just practice some of the things that we've learned. So being able to recognize the number of terms first. Here is one gigantic term. There's no pluses or minuses anywhere. And so I'm just going to write down this one has 1 term. The next polynomial has 2 terms because it's being separated by this minus 2. The next one has 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, because it has 2 symbols in between. 3. And then the last one has 4 terms, A, B, C, and D. Now, because you know the number of terms, we can write the name of the type of the polynomial. Okay, so if it has 1, remember that that's called a monomial. If there's 2 terms, it's called a binomial. 3 is called a trinomial. And anything above 3 is just automatically going to be a polynomial. Okay, now to find the degree of the entire polynomial, what you're going to have to do is you add up all of the exponents. So this one has an exponent 1. We can't really see it. It's invisible, but we know it's there. So add up all the exponents on the variables. 1 plus 2 plus 4 is going to be 7. So the degree of this polynomial is 7. This one has a variable with a k to the power of 1. This has no variables, so it's going to be a degree of 0. So if this one is a degree of 1, this one is a degree of 0, whichever number is the higher number describes the degree of the entire polynomial. And so that would be 1. Okay, so the next one, the degree of the polynomial, this term has a degree 2. This term has a degree 4, 3 plus 1. And this term has a degree 0. So the highest number there is 4. Now the last one, all of them seem to have a degree of 1. And so the degree of the polynomial is the highest, and since they're all the same, we're going to say the degree is 1. All right, so we learned a lot of different words in this video. Make sure that you memorize them. A lot of them should be kind of, I guess, logical, like these ones. All right, but you'll see them again and again.